Welcome to the second video of quantitative section overview. In this video, I'll be covering the data sufficiency basics. So data sufficiency questions are the second kind of questions which comes in the quant section. So data sufficiency question type, the directions are same for all the questions. So you need not read the directions every time when you are reading the question. And in data sufficiency, the answer choices are also same for every question. So each data sufficiency question consists of a question and it consists of two statements labeled as 1 and 2. Using the data given in statements plus our knowledge of mathematics, you must indicate whether the data given in the statements are sufficient. Data given in the statements are sufficient for answering the questions and then indicate one of the following choices. The choices of the data sufficiency questions are as follows. Always the first choice or the A choice is if statement 1 alone is sufficient. 1 alone is sufficient, but statement 2 alone is not sufficient. Second choice is if statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not sufficient to answer the question asked. C choice is both statements 1 and 2 together are sufficient to answer the questions asked, but neither statement alone is sufficient. Question choice D is that each statement alone is sufficient to answer the question asked. If statements 1 and 2 together are also not sufficient to answer the question and additional data is required, then it is option E. As I said, that 5 fixed choices are given for every question in this. So in the flow, first step to data sufficiency question is we need to read the question stem and we need to read only statement 1 first. So you read the statement 1 and evaluate whether statement 1 alone is sufficient or not. If statement 1 alone is sufficient, then the answer choices have to be out of A and D. Then evaluate only statement 2. Okay, if the statement 2 is sufficient, then the answer choice is D. If the statement 2 is not sufficient, then the answer choice is A. Let's see, if statement 1 alone is not sufficient, then it goes with either B, C or E. Then we evaluate statement 2. If statement 2 alone is sufficient, then the answer choice is B. If the statement 2 alone is not sufficient, then the answer choice is out of C or E. Then we evaluate both the statements together. If both the statements together are sufficient, then the answer choice is C, otherwise E. So to make it simple, any question of data sufficiency, first you write on the paper AD slash BCE. If statement 1 alone is sufficient, then the answer choice has to be out of A and D and you strike off BCE. If statement 1 is sufficient, then you evaluate statement 2. If statement 2 is sufficient, then the answer choice is D. If the statement 2 is insufficient, then the answer choice is A. Let's say again we are reading another question. We write on the paper AD B, C, E. Let's say if statement 1 alone is not sufficient to answer the question, then we strike off A and D. Then the answer choice is out of B, C or E. Then we evaluate statement 2. If statement 2 alone is sufficient, the answer choice is B. Otherwise, we strike off B as well. Then only C and E are left as answer choices. Then we see both the statements together, and if both the statements together are sufficient, the answer choice is C, otherwise the answer choice is E. So we'll see that from some examples which I'll be covering in the future slides. But before that, what kind of questions comes in data sufficiency? So there are two kind of questions. One are called the value questions and one are called the yes no kind of questions. In value questions, you will be simply asked a question. What is the value of this? What is the value of that? What is the cost of this? What is the profit? So you need not solve the question, but you should be able to tell whether statements are sufficient to solve the problems or not. The second kind of questions are the yes no questions. Is x even? So the answer to this question can be yes, x is even, or no, x is not even. Does 3a plus 2b is equal to 10? The answer to this question is yes, 3a plus 2b is equal to 10, or no, 3a plus 2b is not equal to 10. Is ab greater than 0? Yes, ab is greater than 0, or no, ab is not greater than 0. You only need to know whether statements are sufficient to tell a yes or no to the question stem. So there are few things to take care. Figures and diagrams in data sufficiency question may not be to the scale drawings as in problem solving questions. And don't assume any variable to be integer unless given, and keep it simple. In yes no questions, if the answer is coming out as no, it is an answer. Means statement is sufficient to find a no. Okay, so now let's see by an example that how do test takers or test writers try to trap you in data sufficiency questions. So this is a very simple question in data sufficiency, that if a plus b is equal to 3, what is the value of a and b? So let's see the first statement. Before that, I need to write a, d, b, c, e. So let me write here a, d, B, C, E. Every data sufficiency question you need to write this AD slash BCE. So reading the first statement, A and B are integers. If A and B are integers, A can be 1, B can be 2. That implies A plus B is equals to 3. Another thing can be A is equals to minus 4, an integer, and B is equals to 7. In this case also, a plus b is equals to 3. Having said that, in this case, a into b is equals to 2. In this case, a into b is equals to minus 28. So, statement 1 alone is not sufficient to answer the question. So, we strike off a and d, and the answer choice is from b, c and e. In this case, now we go to statement 2 alone. A and B are positive. So if A and B are positive, let's say A is equals to 1, B is equals to 2. So we get A plus B is equals to 3. But this statement alone does not say that A and B are integers. So A can also be 1.4. B can also be 1.6 to give us A plus B is equals to 3. In both the cases, A plus B is 3. So statement 2 alone is also not sufficient. So we strike off B. So now the answer choice is either C or E. So now let's see both the statements together. Okay. Both the statements together, if we take, which says A and B are integers. A and B are integers and are positive. Okay. So there are two choices which can come. A is equals to 1, B is equals to 2, or B is equals to 1, A is equals to 2. In both the cases, A plus B is equals to 3. And in both the cases, A into B is equals to 1 into 2 and 2, and we are able to find the answer. So the correct answer to this question is answer C. It's a value question but not a yes no question. Statement 1 alone is not sufficient. Different answers exist of A and B, correct? So the answer is from B, C and E. Statement 2 alone is also not sufficient. So we strike off B from the answer options. Okay, so the answer is from C and E, and combining 1 and 2, we get the solution. So the answer to this question is C. So don't get trapped in data sufficiency questions. So what is the mistake people make here? If we have seen in statement 1 a and b are integers, so when we are considering statement 2 alone also, we think that a and b are integers, but in statement 2 does not clearly specify that a and b are integers. It's together a and b, both the statements are giving us the correct answer. Okay, so now let's try another question of data sufficiency. So this question says, what is the value of a? So now first thing is we need to write ADBCE. So let me write ADBCE as the answer choice. In every data sufficiency question I write this. Now let me take the first statement alone. The first statement alone says a square is equals to 4. That gives me answer choices. A can be 2 or A can be -2. So statement 1 alone is not sufficient. So I strike off A and D. Now let me take statement 2 alone, that is A square plus A minus 6 is equals to 0. I'll factor this equation. Don't worry if you don't know, we'll cover that in detail in the equations chapter. So it says A plus 3, A minus 2 is equals to 0. That implies A is equals to -3 or A is equals to 2. It does not give me unique answer either. So statement 2 alone is also not sufficient. So I cancel B. So I need to take both the statements together. So I substitute A square is equals to 4 in this. So both the statements together I get 4 plus A minus 6 is equals to 0. That implies A is equals to 6 minus 4 is equals to 2. It gives me a unique answer. So the answer choice is C for this question. It's again a value question but not a yes no question. This question checks on foundations of square roots, right? Statement 1 alone is not sufficient, so the answer is out of BCE. Then statement 2 alone is not sufficient, so the answer choice is out of C and E. Combining 1 and 2 we get A is equals to 2, so the answer is C. So now let us try one yes no question, that how GMAT is going to trap you in the yes no question. It's a very simple question. Did Steve eat more than half of 20 mangoes existing? So there are in total 20 mangoes. Okay, how many mangoes did Steve eat? Did Steve eat more than 10 mangoes? This is the question. Did Steve eat more than 10 mangoes? So looking at this, first for every data sufficiency question, what is the first step? We write ADBCE. So I write here ADBCE. So now let me take first statement alone. When we say first statement alone, it says Roger ate 8 mangoes. So most people think that Roger ate 8 mangoes, so Steve must have ate 12 mangoes, so it's an answer. However, it is not given that there are only Steve and Roger, or there are only 2 people to eat mangoes. So statement 1 alone is not sufficient to answer the question. So we strike off A and D. So now let me see the second statement alone, which says Steve ate 12 mangoes out of 20 mangoes. So Steve ate 12 mangoes. So which is our answer? We say that we wanted to know whether Steve ate more than 10 mangoes or not. So statement B alone is giving me an answer. So the answer to this statement, this question is B, that statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not sufficient. So now let us try to change this question a bit. So if this question said that Steve ate 7 mangoes, then what would have been the answer? If statement 2 said Steve ate 7 mangoes out of 20 mangoes. So as always, we write ADBCE to solve the data sufficiency question. So I go to statement 1 first. Which says Roger ate 8 mangoes. Like last time, this is not sufficient. So I strike off A and D. So now I said Steve ate 7 mangoes. So now most of the students think that 7 mangoes is less than 20 mangoes. So B is not an answer. However, the second statement alone is sufficient. So in data sufficiency question, we need not see that whether it's an answer or not. Our aim is to find whether statement 2 is sufficient to answer a yes and no question. Did Steve eat more than half of 20 mangoes? So the answer of this is no, and which is coming out of statement 2 alone. So B is the correct answer. Statement 2 alone is sufficient to answer this question. Do you get the trap in the question? Now let's try the third kind of question. Let's say the statement 2 said Steve ate at least 7 mangoes out of 20 mangoes. So how the question will look like? So first thing is we write A, D, B, C, E. So we see here statement 1. Statement 1 said Roger ate 8 mangoes. Again, like the earlier examples, it is insufficient. So we strike off A and D. So now we say that Steve ate at least 7 mangoes. So he ate more than equal to 7 mangoes. It may be 7, it may be 8, it may be 9, it may be 10, it may be 11, it may be 12, it may be 13. Like here, he ate less than 50%, and here he ate more than 50%, and if the answer is this, he ate 50%. So statement 2 also is not sufficient to answer. Okay, so now let's combine 1 and 2. It does not say that Steve and Roger are the only people who are eating mangoes. So 1 and 2 together are also not sufficient. So our answer choice is E. So the answer for the third scenario is E. So the data sufficiency question, you need to read very carefully and you need to read the answer choices very carefully. Don't make any assumptions. Okay? Don't make any assumptions. So having said that, in data sufficiency, your foundations should be strong, your concepts should be fine, and you should read the questions and answer options very carefully, and no assumptions. If you take, you are through in the test. Okay, thank you so much. We'll be covering the basics of various topics in the upcoming videos. All the best. Bye bye.